I now request Dr. Srilata Rao to make her presentation. Srilata Rao Seshadri has worked extensively with the World Bank and other international organizations to develop, supervise, and evaluate large-scale health projects. She's worked across several states in India, and in the last position, she was the director of the Center for Global Health Research in Bangalore. And here she led a national study on the use of evidence in health sector research and decision-making, providing policy guidance on the most cost-effective strategies to reduce available health and disability. She is currently a faculty member with the Azim Premji University. Srilata.
Okay, so today I want to talk about decentralization in the context of the health sector. And basically the use of decentralization as an instrument for implementing various health programs, especially now in India under the National Rural Health Mission. This has become quite an important strategy that the government has been using. Basically shifting power and responsibility between tiers of government and shifting also fiscal, political, and administrative, using these different types of instruments to empower lower levels of government to take up implementation of programs. Of course, this has been a strategy that has been identified as an important one ever since Alma Ata, and even perhaps before, but in the Alma Ata declaration, it was certainly recognized that greater community level involvement in the planning and execution of health programs would make a big difference to health outcomes. And then subsequently in India, we've had the 73rd Amendment, which tried to address some of the gaps in service delivery. And it tried to delegate some administrative functions and other financial powers as well to lower levels of government through decentralization of several different activities. There were, I think, 29 different domains that were sought to be decentralized. Not all states have taken up all areas, but some states, such as Karnataka, have indeed decentralized all 29 of these functions. However, it has been well recognized that the success of this decentralization has been mixed, and there are several reasons for this. There has been political and bureaucratic resistance. It's not always easy for higher levels of government and administration to let go of control of certain types of activities that they have been used to taking charge of. There's been a lack of money following the decentralization decisions. So except for perhaps in Kerala, where substantial amounts of funding have also been given to these decentralized bodies, other states have not actually been able to do that. And also the lack of clarity of what are the ultimate responsibilities of these bodies going to be? What are they going to be held accountable for? So if we look at the different types of decentralization, the modalities that have been used, there are areas where there has been some deconcentration, and then there has been actual devolution. What is deconcentration? It basically refers to extending the reach of the central government and strengthening its authority through the executive powers, deconcentrating executive powers to lower levels. So one could look at, for example, the district collector or the district magistrate being one example of deconcentration, where they're actually performing the functions of a higher level of government, but only placed sitting at a lower level. But devolution is actually when higher levels of government give up control of agency and resources to political and other actors at lower levels. And so there's an actual transfer of power from one level to another. And this will include management powers, legislative powers, financial powers, and other types of powers as well. So why did we undertake this study? And going into the rationale a little bit, we kept coming up against this assumption that somehow the success of policies and programs depends crucially on having greater autonomy and accountability at lower levels of administration. And there have been many studies that have provided evidence both for and against, and one of the studies indicated that if the greater the level of ownership and vision that drives this initiative towards the decentralization at higher levels, the greater the likelihood of success of decentralization, and the greater the likelihood that personnel at lower levels would be genuinely empowered to be able to do this. Unfortunately, there isn't as much evidence as we would like to actually be able to come to any conclusion on whether or not decentralization, which has been such a central focus of our programs, is actually an effective strategy to use in order to achieve better outcomes. And so what we decided was to do a study of our own. And this was in the context of a larger project that we have which looks at translating evidence into policy. And this is the District Interventions in Successful Health Action. And in that project, what we're doing is developing report cards at the district level of health outcomes, health achievements, health infrastructure, and so on. And what does it mean? What kinds of differences does that result in the number of deaths at the district level and avertable mortality at the district level? When we started disseminating this information, we picked a handful of stakeholders who would receive this information, and these included the district collector, the district health officer, the CMHO equivalent in different states, the district surgeon, the chief executive officer of the Zilla Panchayat, the MLAs and MPs. As we began this activity of dissemination of information, the question arose as to, were these the people who were actual decision makers at the district level? Suppose they did get the information, and suppose they did decide to respond to it, were they actually empowered, were they enabled to respond to this kind of information? Could they actually make any difference at their level in terms of reallocation of resources to be able to follow some of the recommendations made in these report cards? So based on that, we thought of exploring a few questions about whether the decentralization under the NRHM actually correlates strongly with the perceived decision space. And we'll talk about the concept of decision space in a minute. Decision space of health department officials and PRI members at the district level. Does the capacity of functionaries at different levels of the health system correlate with the perceived decision space? And does greater perceived decision space by functionaries and officials lead to better health outcomes? We have chosen 6 districts within Karnataka, and these districts have been, they follow a previous study that we have done on capacity building in Karnataka, which was done in collaboration with the government. And I better move right along here. So we have built up the model on Tom Bossart's framework, which basically looks at decision space in a very specific way. And his framework essentially puts together this idea that decision space refers to the choices allowed by the central authorities to be utilized by local authorities. So to what extent do local authorities feel that they have the degrees of freedom required to be actually able to carry out the functions that have been devolved to them? So we developed a set of questions which had previously also, some version of this has been used in Pakistan and Africa and elsewhere. and looked at six functional verticals: human resources, performance monitoring, access rules, and a couple of others which have to do with service delivery and contract management. And our findings were sort of, I have to say, mixed. We have not completed the study. We've only covered 3 districts so far. The third district, 2 of the districts are from Karnataka. The third district was Karimnagar, and we only took Karimnagar because it was sort of opportunistic, and we had an opportunity to administer our instrument in Karimnagar, so we went ahead and did that. We still have 4 districts to go in Karnataka to be able to understand in depth what is happening in terms of decision space there. But the findings are mixed. As we see, amongst program managers, and program managers we have defined as those who are specifically in charge of a program such as the TB program or the malaria program or the reproductive and child health program. We find that they are fairly high uniformly on monitoring, but on other areas of decision space, particularly, for example, HR, being able to reallocate human resources within the district, very low. Except, as we see, on all parameters, Karimnagar is very high as compared to the 2 districts in Karnataka. The same with senior health managers, and senior health managers were basically the CMHO or DHO and the district surgeon. If we look at their perceived level of decision space, it's marginally better than the program managers in terms of service delivery, in terms of finance, at least in some districts, and definitely in terms of monitoring. They do feel that they have some control over their activities, but it's not as clear-cut a picture that emerges from the data that we have so far. In terms of the PRI, we find that when we look at access rules, which is essentially enhancing community engagement in decision making in the health sector, they do have some influence, but it's very low. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 5, basically they're scoring less than 2.5. So the role of the PRI is actually quite minimal. However, if we go back to the case of Karimnagar, the difference between Karimnagar and the 2 districts in Karnataka is that for the last 2 years in Karimnagar, they've not had PRI elections. So they actually don't have PRI, and what influence that has on the sense of empowerment of these district level officers is a very interesting question, and I think one that needs to be looked at, even though the PRI in Karnataka appear not to feel empowered. And if we look at the health outcome data is not available right now, but if we look at, for example, the service delivery indicators between the 3 districts, which have had a very different profile in terms of their decision space, perceived decision space, it's again an extremely mixed picture between the 3 districts. And I think what we need to do is, of course, we need to complete the study. But apart from that, it appears that the individual differences are very important. And looking at decision space, even aggregated at the district level, is perhaps not adequate to understanding what really needs to be done in order to make this decentralization really functional. And a couple of years ago in Rajasthan, for example, they had a database which they had developed for senior managers at the district level and above, which really tracked the kind of capacity building and other activities that had taken place in order for them to build their own capacities. And maybe that is really the answer, that we need to look at individuals and how we can empower individuals. Because changes, if you look at the individual level data, even amongst program managers, there's a huge variation in the perceived level of decision space. There's no real principle that can sort of predict what it's going to be. So these are some of the issues. And then the fact that the PRI feels disempowered, we need to look more closely into some of those issues as well to understand better what it is that we can do to actually strengthen the hands of the PRI, and better understand how we can make decentralization into a positive experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.